Okay, so the lectures are going to be set up with these narrated PowerPoints, but I'm going to break the PowerPoints up, so you're not going to get 50 minutes of listening to a PowerPoint. I'm going to break it up into segments. So in this section of the narrated PowerPoint, we are just going to look at department stores and specialty retailers. Before we even talk about department stores and retail, and especially retails, let's just talk about some trends in retailing. And right now, there are more than 1.1 million retailers in the U.S., and it ranges from street vendors to retailers that offer thousands of products in their stores. So the type of retailers that we as consumers chooses depends on what we are seeking, right? So in the world that we've moved to, many of us have rediscovered the small business and the importance of keeping small businesses afloat. But if you're shopping for a gift, you generally try to use what's most convenient, right? You use the method that's most convenient for you, and in many cases, that is an online retailer. I've been very cognizant of my choices during the pandemic and trying to buy online from small businesses to keep them afloat. But we have those decisions that we can make. So I could purchase a shirt from a small online small business, but I could purchase it from Amazon or Target or Macy's or Banana or Gap. There's a lot of we really have a lot of choices, but retailers survive and prosper really because they group consumer needs together more effectively than their competitors, and we patronize different types of retail depending on our different types of needs. And as our needs change, new retail formats are created and existing formats evolve. So that's one of the biggest trends in retailing. And the most basic characteristic used to describe the different types of retailers is their retail mix, or the elements that retailers use to customize to satisfy customer needs. So there are four key identifiers in the retail mix, and one is the type of merchandise or service officer offered, the variety and assortment of merchandise, the level of customer service, and the price. So next, we're going to talk about on the next slide. We're going to talk about that mix, right? That variety and assortment that every retailer has. Last slide before we actually get to department and specialty retailers. So when we talked about in the previous slide, we talked a little bit about the mix, right? We talked about the retail mix. We talked about the components for that retailers use to determine which merchandise they're going to offer. And the two key things that retailers use, so they can offer the same merchandise, but they differ that merchandise in the variety and assortment, right? So variety is merchandise, just the categories that a retailers offers. This is also known as the breadth of merchandise, right? So categories would be, tops, bottoms, in those tops or bottoms. Then there is the assortment, right? So the assortment is the number of different items that are offered in a merchandise category. So in tops, you may have t-shirts and tank tops and blouses and sweatshirts. So you have those different items offered within a category. And this is known as the depth of merchandise. And each item fulfills a need for a particular customer that retailer is trying to reach, right? And the retailer, depending on the retailer, they either focus on having a wide variety or having a wide assortment. So having a large breadth of merchandise or having a deep depth of merchandise. So if were to consider a store like Target, they have a wide variety, but their assortment may not be as deep as a store like Macy's, right? So, if we were to think about dresses, women's dresses. So at Target, they're going to have women's dresses in the juniors department and in the women's department and in the plus size department, and actually in the maternity department. So they have those different varieties, but their assortment is not going to be nearly as close. They won't have as many SKUs, as many items as a store like Macy's, right? So Macy's is going to have way more depth of merchandise. And speaking of the word SKU, right? The word SKU, you know that word, but it's actually an acronym for a stock keeping unit. And, that's just um, the way that retailers keep track of their assortment by having a SKU for each item. So make sure you know these words, right? That you know variety, assortment, and SKU. And, when retailers are selecting their breadth and depth of merchandise, they are looking at prices. They are looking at the prices um, of that breadth and depth. So oftentimes retailers will um, make their depth in a what's known as a good, better, best scenario. So they'll have a entry level t-shirt, right? So that they'll have an $8 t-shirt, they'll have a $15 t-shirt, they'll have a $20 t-shirt, right? So they will have that depth based on price. And there are infinite variations, and that's part of what a buyer does is they help decide what that variation is. And the goal really is for some combination of variety and assortment, so some combination of breadth and depth of merchandise will satisfy all the needs of a significant portion of their customers, and they will be able to fulfill those needs for a good portion of time. In following, what we just said on the previous slide, we here's a visual. This is a visual with some bad clip art, but here is a visual. So variety would be wide versus narrow, and it's just it's the breadth of merchandise. So it's just the number of merchandise categories. So a store like Target is going to have computers and jewelry and dresses. They don't sell motorcycles, but we're gonna say bicycles. And then the depth of the merchandise is deep versus shallow. So just how many SKUs they have in actual categories. So again, all this bad clip art, all these old cell phones on it. But this is a visual of the difference between breadth and depth of merchandise. So we finally made it. We made it to here. I keep saying next slide, next slide, this slide. So there are different types of merchandise retailers. They're oftentimes they're known as general merchandise retailers, and they include department stores and specialty stores and full line discounters and category specialists, extreme value killers, off price retail. Um, and then there's some others, some dots in there as well. But that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time in the lecture, in these PowerPoint parts of the lecture, talking about these different categories. So we're going to start with department and specialty stores, and then we'll dive into all of the others. Starting with department stores, right? The first department store actually was the first department store in the U.S. actually was in New York City. It was known as T. Stewart, and it opened in 1847. So it was our first department store. And department stores are not unique to definitely not unique to the United States, but are an important part of um, retailing overall. So department stores, we all know them, whether we shop in them or not. I've really um, lessened the amount of department store shopping I do, even though I'm still a Nordstrom. I'm still a Nordy at heart. But department stores are on the decline, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on where you are. But department stores are retailers that carry a broad variety and a deep assortment. They offer customer services, and they organize their stores into distinct departments displaying merchandise. So, there's a dress department, there's a lingerie department, there are departments that are vendor specific. There are departments that are by categories. And if we think of some of the largest department stores in the United States, many of them are on the decline. So, Sears, J.C. Penney's, um, Sears has filed for bankruptcy three times, a bunch of times, bankruptcy and reorganizing. J.C. Penney's is always teetering. They're right at the edge of someone buying them out right now. Um, Macy's, Kohl's, that are here in California. Dillard's, which is actually there's a Dillard's in California. It's in Lancaster, but Dillard's is more of an East Coast department store. And then of course, places like Nordstrom's and Saks, the high end department stores as well. But traditionally department stores attracted their customers by offering great ambiance and attentive service and a wide variety of merchandise under one roof. And they offered, you know, um, what are known as non-durable consumables. So, cosmetics and perfumes, but they also um, offered, clothing, apparel, bedding, right? And if we look at some of these retailers, so if we look at Sears, they also offered what are known as, hard or durable goods, which are items that just have a really, really long lifespan. So furniture or appliances or consumer electronics. But most department stores now just focus on, on soft goods, on non-durable consumables. So apparel, clothing, and cosmetics. But department stores, really still focus on men's, women's, and children apparel. Some home furnishings, cosmetics, some kitchenware and small appliances. But department stores often have specifics or often have things that they focus on more than others. So, if we go into Macy's always has a huge cosmetic counter, cosmetics and perfume, whereas if you were to go into a Sears, on the other hand, actually Sears took cosmetics out of their stores altogether about 5 years ago. But department stores are categorized into three tiers. There are upscale, high fashion department stores, so that would be the Neiman's and the Nordstroms and the Bloomingdale's of the world, which actually Bloomingdale's is owned by Macy's. And then the second tier is going to be, much more traditional. So Macy's and Dillard's as department stores. And then there are the moderately priced department stores that have, less customer service, or even oftentimes are seen as value oriented department stores. And that would be, Sears, J.C. Penney's, and Kohl's. Those are the type of stores that are considered third tier. But department stores really account for some of retailing's most cherished traditions. So, we think of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. We think of, Nordstrom's holiday decorations, and, now it's going into the mall, but when I was a kid, it was going to the department store to see Santa. But, consumers really are just questioning whether those small benefits outweigh the cost of actually shopping in department stores. You know, there are destinations, and because they have such a wide variety and assortment, oftentimes it's more difficult to shop those retailers online because you could search for red dresses and get 300 results, right? Or more. So, you know, department stores are, teetering at this point. They're teetering, and really, what happens after we get to the other side of this COVID is going to determine, how department stores, um, you know, if they maintain or if they decrease. But one of the things that department store retail is focusing on is they're really increasing the amount of exclusive merchandise and exclusive brands that they have that differentiate them from other department stores. So, department stores are aggressively seeking exclusive brands, which are different than national brand vendors, but that are generally attached to a name that we recognize, right? So, Jennifer Lopez has a clothing, I think she still has it, has a clothing line. I know Vera Wang does, a clothing line at Kohl's. At one point, Ralph Lauren had a line of casual apparel exclusively at JCPenney's called American Living. And customers, they become destinations for the customer. So if a customer, wants to, actually, Tracy Ellis Ross about a year ago had a exclusive brand partnership with JCPenney's, and I went out and bought a piece or two just because she's my spirit animal. She's my fashion spirit animal. But customers really are looking for that exclusivity, and oftentimes those exclusive brands bring them just into the store. And additionally, department stores are moving much more towards private label brands or store brands, whereas really oftentimes store brands are, you don't even know it's a store brand, you consider it a brand. So Macy's has done a really great job with that, with their INC, their international concepts with that brand, or with their Alfani brand, which they're only available at Macy's because they are private label brands. What department stores really need to do is they need to expand their, multi-channel multi-channel retailing that we talked about, right? They need to increase their social media presence. Nordstrom's has done a really good job where customers can go online, reserve their product, and pick them up in store. And this was pre-pandemic, right? And also where customers can return online purchases in store, because that takes them into the store. So the hope is they will return whatever they ordered online, and they will spend some time and buy something. Will buy something else. So, department stores they're at a crossroads at this point, and they'll either adapt and survive, or unfortunately they won't. Next, we're going to talk about specialty stores, and specialty stores have their issues as well. But first, let's just define what specialty stores are. Specialty stores tailor their strategy towards very specific market segments by offering deep but narrow assortments of the categories that they carry. So they don't carry as many categories, but they go deep in the categories that they do carry. And then they offer, you know, sales associate expertise. So their staff are experts, right? So, think of Victoria's Secret. It's a leading retailer of lingerie and beauty products in the United States. Um, but they have some very well qualified salespeople that work in Victoria's Secrets as well. So, specialty retailers have really great appeal because they actually are one of the fastest growing and more profitable um, retail organizations in the world, in part because specialty retailers focus on, like I said, such a very limited limited variety, but a really deep assortment. So if you want something specific, you go to a specialty retailer. So if you think of yoga pants, you think of Lululemon, right? You think of you know ready to wear career wear. You think of Banana. If you think of fast fashion, so if you think of things that are highly trendy, um, you think of Zara and H&M, right? So those are all specialty retailers, and they have great appeal amongst consumers, right? Because you go into a department store, you may wander, but if you go into a specialty retailer, you can get what you want, and get in and out, right? And additionally, many brands, many manufacturers have opened their own specialty stores. So Levi's has their own stores, and Lucky Brand jeans have their own stores. My good buddies at Polo Ralph Lauren have their own stores because they grew tired of having their business be 100% at the mercy of other retailers and having to sell items at wholesale and making less percentage profit when they can open their own specialty store and make 100% of the profit on their own. So, specialty retailers are actually growing. And within specialty retailers, there are some categories that are growing faster than others. So, active is growing faster because we have moved into the athleisure world where athletic apparel is not worn just to work out. It is, for some people, is business casual at this point, right? Is work attire. But athleisure is growing, and also resale and thrifting. Whereas Goodwill used to be not on many people's radar, that the move of resale is growing. And then if you think of higher end resale, places like the Real Real and Fashion File, those specialty retailers that just focus on reselling designer goods. And in that specialty store, under that specialty store umbrella, there are what are known as category specialists, or category killers, right? So these are stores that have a really deep assortment of items in a specific category. So if you think of Bass Pro Shops, it is essentially a sporting department store, right? But it's considered a specialty store because it focuses on such a tight market, right? So category specialists are generally what are known as big box stores, but they offer a narrow or deep assortment. So some of these category specialists, we see Bass Pro here, but DSW for shoes, or Michaels for crafts, IKEA for furniture, or places like REI, when it still existed, Toys R Us, but Office Max, Office Depot, they're really category specialists. So they are specialty retailers, but they focus on just one category, but they have a deep assortment, really deep assortment in that category. So their goal is to have, low prices, and great service, but they are destinations. Like if you need office supplies, you go to Office Max, Depot, or Staples, right? And category specialists predominantly use a self-service approach, but they do offer assistance to customers. And the assistance that they offer is generally expert level. So if you think about Bass Pro Shops, if you go into the fishing section, that guy knows everything about fishing. If you go into the hunting section, that guy knows everything about hunting. So even though they offer a self-service approach, the folks that they have working in the store are subject matter experts. So and even in the category, in the specialty retailer categories, in the category of specialty retailers, there are some that do this to the nth degree, right? So they offer a complete assortment in the category, and they can kill that category merchandise for other retailers. So they're known as category killers. They just use their dominance and buying power to buy products at such a low price that they ensure the supply when the items is scarce. So, you know, Bass Pro is a Bass Pro is a category killer. They take care of the outdoors, yeah, the hunting, the fishing, anything outdoors. They kill the category. You cannot beat them on price. You cannot beat them on assortment, and you cannot beat them on knowledge. So, even though these category specialists compete with other types of retailers, um, the competition between them is really intense, right? To the point that oftentimes they buy one another. So, when we talk about, if we were to talk about office supplies, right? So there were three main players: Office Depot, Office Max, and Staples. Well, Office Depot bought Office Max, so they're one company, and it's Office Max, Office Depot, Staples. That's it. The competition between them, we don't have a lot of choices, right? So on the home improvement side, we have Home Depots and Lowe's. Now, True Value is out there as well, but when you think of home improvement, you think of Home Depot and Lowe's. So, sometimes the specialists are so well at what they do that they drive the competition away, and there really is no competition. Best Buy is in a category all its own because it doesn't have Circuit City as its main competition anymore, right? So, Best Buy owns that category of consumer electronics, with its competition being Target, Walmart, and the internet, right? And the whole internet. So, especially retailers do have a growing importance, right? And oftentimes they do try to differentiate themselves by having employees, sales associates that are experts in what they do. These category specialists too, they really have room for incredible growth as they start whittling off competition where there's maybe one or two choices in this category. There's unlimited growth potential for them.